Connie would avoid the rent man for a few days and then cough up what they owed, a little behind time when they had the money. Sometimes Winterbourne became angry with her for doing so and threatened to turf the family out of the hovel. Ada had no idea what sort of arrangement Connie had with the man, but so far she'd managed to keep both him and the wolf at the door at bay. But then again, Ada reminded herself that maybe Winterbourne was the very wolf himself. Apart from hearing the couple from the apartment below coming in late and going to bed as they sang loudly off the top of their heads, no doubt after consuming several gins at the pub on the corner, Ada heard no more as she drifted off to a silent slumber. Slivers of daylight filtered into the bedroom through the thin moth-eaten curtains when Ada awoke the following morning, realising that something was very wrong. It was much lighter than it should be for when Connie rose to go to work at the match factory. Usually it was still dark outside. Startled, she leapt out of bed to see her sister's bed hadn't been slept in. It was still neatly made, and her nightgown folded on top of it. Could she have arrived home, and not wishing to disturb her brother and sister, left them asleep while she got ready for work? But no. Ada was always such a light sleeper. She would have heard her sister pouring water into the basin to wash her face and hands before starting work, or she'd have heard other noises like the kettle boiling for tea. Connie liked to eat some breakfast before she got to the factory, as they were forced to eat their food there at their workstations, and she'd said on more than one occasion they were reprimanded for taking visits to the toilet and washroom. Even their pay could be docked without warning for it. So she liked to have a big breakfast, when they could afford it, of porridge and toast, and a tin mug of tea before setting off. That way she'd go most of her shift with no food inside her at all, only a cup of tea at work, as she felt it was safer to drink from a mug or cup than it was to lift a slice of bread and jam to her lips with powdery fingers. Ada glanced at Sam, who was still asleep beside her, thankfully. This was one occasion when he hadn't drenched the bed. Nudging him with her elbow, she said, "Come on, it's later than I thought it was. I don't know where our Connie is this morning, but I think something might be up." Sam groaned and opened one eye, and then another.
"Maybe she's in the yard, getting water from the pumps,"
he said, sounding unintelligible, like the pair of drunks she'd heard staggering from the public house into their apartment below last night. Of course, she realised Sam was still half asleep.
"You go and use the privy before you have an accident with your bladder again," she warned. "I'll go and put the kettle on to boil and make us breakfast."
He nodded and smiled, and then rubbing his eyes with both fists, he let out a loud yawn.
"What then?"
he asked.
"Then we go to look for our Connie," she said solemnly. "We need to find her."
By the time Sam had returned, Ada had put the kettle on to boil on the fire, and was in the midst of searching the cupboards to see what she could make them for breakfast. Usually there was some oatmeal around, but the small Hessian sack was empty. Maybe that's why Connie had gone out late last night to try to buy some, but why hadn't she returned home as yet?
"We'll have to make do with some bread and scrape," she said to her brother.
There was only a large stale crust left that had seen better days, but with some dripping in the tin spread over it, it would go down a treat on a cold day. There was no milk in the jug either, so they'd have to have their tea without it, but at least there would be something hot inside them to set them up for the day. Following breakfast, they washed and dressed, Ada ensuring that Sam put his woolen socks on inside his boots, as both had small holes in the soles from wear and tear. They were stuffed with newspaper, and Connie had promised next time she got her pay that she'd take them to the cobbler shop to be resold. They just couldn't afford to purchase new shoes at the moment. Ada also insisted he wore a second jumper over the first, and then he put on his twill jacket, which was getting too small for him as it was riding up well over his wrists. She donned her warmest dress, thick woolen stockings, and took a second shawl with her. It was going to be a perishing walk over to the Bryant and May factory. Even though it was early summer, it had done nothing but rain so far throughout the month of June. Her plan was to hang around the gates outside to ask if anyone had seen their Connie, or if they could pass a message on to her. At this time of day, the outworkers often queued up to purchase the cardboard, glue and string to assemble the boxes at home. They were paid a pittance for their trouble, but it was something that the whole family could help with, and deemed safer than working on the factory floor with the white powder at any rate. Ada worried about her big sister at times, as she'd heard tales of how some of the girls and women lost their teeth after working.